Welcome back to Story Time with Petey. So today is the Encycloedia Brown in the case of the Screaming Skull. I'd encourage you to stick around. This one takes a while to get going. There's so much backstory that I'm going to try to condense before we get to the actual human skull. So, how the heck are you guys doing? I'm doing good. I've sat on this one for a long time. It's going to be so difficult for me to tell this story quickly and efficiently. We go back in time to the confused youth, the poor boy living in the small town, and he beginning to stray off into the world of rock and roll and experimenting with Miller High Life and poorly grown marijuana. I joined this band. This band kind of came together. It was like I had a Sensonics drum set I had bought in Florida at a Cuban discount store for $5. And this other guy, Steve, and Danny was a singer. Steve was his drummer buddy who didn't have a drum kit. He was a thief. And I made the mistake of letting him play those. I had recorded some songs where I had impersonated people, famous people in the neighborhood area who kind of had it coming, and I would make a song about them and impersonate them and really run deep with it and have people like literally in tears listening to it, because the stuff that I would say was really outrageous. Now, so I had, those Sensonics had value to me at that time, and we did a little jam session. The first time we ever played was me with a Les Paul with a Big Muff and a digital delay, some other chorus pedal and some stuff, and then Steve on my Sensonics plugged into a home stereo, and Danny just sang. Now, Steve kept pounding on those Sensonics. He had real sticks, and I'm like, dude, you only need to tap them, and you're wailing on it. And he kept giving me this look and telling me to, well, he broke them, which was unbelievably uncool. Never said anything about it to me, which is, you'll see that's a pattern with Steve. Stealing stuff like Ampeg tube amps, a brand new Chevy Corsica that Danny never got back, that he traded for drugs. Oh wait, he did get it back, completely trashed many years later, and I had to pay all kinds of fines for impound fees. And so yeah, Steve ends up as one of the more colorful characters in the story. He's constantly drumming on the back of the seat when you're sitting there because he wants to sit in the front, and stealing everyone's girlfriend, or trying to, making an effort to try to do that. I remember one of his girlfriends being around 400 to 500 pounds, and sitting next to her, next to all the bags of fast food and ashtrays full of Newports, was a lockpick kit that was hers. So here comes the 500-pound globulous woman picking your lock. This is the type of guy we're dealing with, this Steve. Now, there was another Steve, Beaver. He was the first bass player for this band, and I took his place. And then he popped up in another band, and I took his place in that band. So, sorry, Beaver, but you shouldn't have spray painted all that shit on the tower. The giant skull kind of gave us away, and you shot me in the head with a squirt gun at that party that one time. And I still remember that. So, Danny is into Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, and that's the type of material we're doing. We quickly get rid of Steve after the broken Sensonics incident, get a real drummer named Lee. We played this birthday party. They had this alcoholic guy show up. He had a big, giant tub of hard liquor that he was spilling all over himself. Long Island iced tea. And we had him there for one gig playing a mini moog. And then I remember I set up this gig called Hog-Aid at a hog farm. That a lot of people were going to come to this barn. They were going to roast a hog. So it was like a more legit gig. And that was really the only legit gig that band played at that time, was Hog-Aid. We had gotten another guitar player who was a head case, Mike. And there'll be more about that guy later. He's got a spirit hunting channel where he goes to children's cemeteries while people are coming up to put little flowers on the graves, and he's there with all kinds of electronics trying to get EVP, electro voice phenomena. Like, this guy is He's an a-hole for doing that. That's uncool. That's uncool. He's got videos of him hanging out at cemeteries where he's or behind a funeral home where the body's fresh, trying to talk to the body, spirits. And yeah, that guy was a real head case. So we have that guitar player. We played this whole gig. Everything was fantastic. But we needed practice because we had some new songs. We didn't have that much material. We had to play a couple songs twice at Hogade, which really was embarrassing. And because it was my gig, I was really pushing for the band to get tight. And they were, oh, we can't practice this week because of my parents. And I gotta work. And so I had begged my mom to let us play in the garage at my house. And she let me do it. So we're in there, we're playing, we get through 2 songs, and it's loud. And here she comes, whipping into the garage, and everyone stops in between a break, and everyone stops. And my mom comes walking in and says, well, I hope you boys are having fun making your music, because this is what you're going to be playing in hell. And then she walked out. Because my mom's a really awesome Christian, really believes in God, and it was so awesome what she said. Anyway, I found out later this Steve Hester guy wasn't even in the band. Danny he had bought a Necronomicon, and I knew about this, that's a book by Anton LaVey. It's supposedly the Book of the Dead written by the Mad Arab, Ahab the Mad Arab, which I don't know how much of that. I would never looked at that book. They always tried to get me to read it and drag me into them. They would go into the cemetery at night in the moonlight and talk about how great it was reading this book and how they were going to get all this power and they were going to get girls and the band was going to be a success. And looking at all this symbology and all this, and it made my stomach crawl. And I honestly should have immediately gotten away. But I was so confused after. It's no excuse, but my dad died, and I was. The only thing that I had in my life was that I could play that bass. That was the only thing I had. I was picked on so hard by my family, and not accepted by them, and my family kind of kicked me to the curb, and I was mocked. And every time I did try to come around, they would say stuff at the dinner table. They would joke about Catholics. My older brother would say something to my little brother. It was never really my little brother, but there was so much stuff that it hurt me. Maybe I should have had a thicker skin and been able to take that. But that's kind of my story. Is I have music. And like my older brother has a cocaine addiction, and he's gone to many churches and been asked to leave. He's been kicked out of many churches. So that whole battle between good and evil thing still exists in my life. And I do believe in God. I do believe in Jesus. I just want to state that for the record. But I'm not so much the type of person that I see in a church, because when I've been in a church, I felt judgmental towards all the other people that are there, and that's something that I struggle with. So that's my testimony, but you need to understand who I am and why I'm making this video, and who I am through the course of this video to understand it, okay? But I'm also not ashamed to say that I believe in Jesus, because I do. So, as I'm going through this experience, I find out that I got in an argument with my mom because she came in. I was like, that was really uncool what you said. And she was just like, and I'm like, that's the only reason you had us come, is so you could say that to these guys. Come whipping in there. And she acted like she had to get something out of the freezer and then right back up. So through that argument, she told me that she had been praying for a spirit of confusion and disunity in our band. And that really, really angered me. And I made the mistake of telling those guys. I told the band. So Danny told Steve, they came to my house at like 3 a.m. and performed a ritual where they put some kind of pixie dust, some devil dust, They put it all around the perimeter of my house. And I remember I found out about that later. And that same Steve guy, he had in and out of jail. He had contacted my mom while he was in jail and claimed that he had come to the Lord and he was a Christian. And I'm thinking he wanted money. I know he's around, and I wouldn't say that he's living a Christian lifestyle. He sent me photos of his genitalia, and then I said, please don't send me any dick pics. And he was like, what the fuck are you talking about, and all this and that, and got mad and kept sending back profanity until I banned him. But that's what the photo was of. It was only half of his erect genitalia, but yeah, that's what it was. And it might not have been his. I know he probably went down that homosexual one after that because he needed to whore himself to get some pipe resin to scrape someone's bowl. So, because that's the type of guy that he was. In any event, as Danny would say, they came and they put the pixie dust around my home, and they when I woke up this morning, there was a driving cone, a cone on my car. So they had come to my house in the middle of the night and done something and left. Someone else said, oh yeah, I woke up, I had a cone on my car too. That was the night that they did that. And keep in mind, I don't talk to any of these people anymore. Through my life, I miss Dan. I miss Danny because, just apart from the fact that he was into that stuff for a while, we were really close friends. But he, just as a person, he just kind of doesn't want to have what it takes. He's got such a horrible alcohol problem that I can't be his friend. So, setting all this up, they're reading their Necronemy books. They're in the woods of Illinois. At this one point, I had been in the car. Danny had this jean jacket that he had all of his patches on, his Iron Maiden patches. And Steve was in the back seat. And Steve says, the stench. And they both start laughing maniacally. And so I'm thinking, oh man, I didn't wear enough deodorant, or I must have bad breath today. It happens again. The stench. And on the third time, when I was out with these guys and they did that, I said, listen, you guys got to let me in on what the stench is. And they wouldn't stop laughing about it. So they wouldn't tell me, and I kept working on Danny about it over the years. I would bring it up. And finally he told me what the stench was. They had broken into a mausoleum that had been burned. The family tomb. And removed a casket. There's 3 of them. They were lifting this casket over their heads and dropping it on the curb over and over until it opened up and the body came out, which was unbelievably decomposed. And they removed the head and then wrapped that up in Dan's jean jacket, because he didn't have any, there was nothing in the trunk of his car except for his jack and his typical good American Boy Scout boy. Not a single thing. He had to use his prized possession, and then it stunk. It smelled like this human decay. And Dan washed it and washed it and washed it and washed it and couldn't get the smell out of this jacket from this human head. Now, that's a power thing that Satanists will do. They will get a head from one of your relatives and cast their spells on it, is what I know. I'm not an expert, but I've heard that. I've also heard a huge story that the reason that they got in was the mausoleum had been burned, and someone tried to desecrate it. Now, the story that I heard behind that was the family that guy was a huge drug dealer in Chicago. The Grateful Dead were coming to town, and they had organized this massive cocaine deal. So something went bad with the deal, and there was bad blood between and the great Jerry Garcia's people. So they went after this mausoleum and burned it in an attempt to desecrate, to send a message to. And Danny and his buddies were there to read their Necronymity book, and they accidentally fell under this spell to complete this curse, is the story I was told later. Now, I don't believe any of that story. I think that's something that Danny made up, as he felt guilty about doing that. But I do know that that band was never successful. I tried so unbelievably hard to get those guys to be serious. We ended up getting a whole nother breath of life, where it ended up being me, Danny, and another guy who had a home with a small recording studio, project studio in it, with a 4-track. Later on, he got reel-to-reel stuff, and he soundproofed the garage and had bought a PA, and that was also the same drummer. And then we brought in another guitar player and a sister of one of the band members and one of her friends to sing backups. So, and then there was like a guy that was supposedly the manager who never got us. He got us a couple of gigs. He was just a guy who hung out in the bar, and we had like a roadie dude. And that band, we practiced so much. We had like 35 songs and a 15-song shit pile, but we could have done a lot better than we did if we would have got rid of some people, specifically people that couldn't sing in tune, sing in key, and the crackhead problem in the band, the alcoholism, the unbelievable alcoholism in the band was what dragged us down. So all of those problems, dealing with all of that, ended up to me bitterly leaving that rock and roll thing a year after I got married. I was like, because the band was in a lull, and I got out, and then they went on. They continued. They didn't even let me know. They went and got a better bass player, some guy named Pappy that had all of his fingers, and they ended up like. They did a gig where they opened up for Papa Roach in some place in Milwaukee. So they did play some gigs. They got a really good guitar player. Danny was still singing for them, and then they got rid of Danny, and they got rid of one of those guys that sings like that. And I saw them play at the local bowling alley, and they had an unbelievable crowd of people in there drinking and singing along to the song. A lot of large women. For some reason, that band attracted a whale following. These huge fatties. I'm not exaggerating about that. That's all it was. It was just giant women, huge women in there. And I mentioned it to the singer, and he was like, yeah, they're so-and-so's friend. They're all friends of the band. They come to every gig. I was thinking, well, I'm glad to see you guys made it to the top. But at that point, none of those people were in the band. None of those original Necronymity reading people were in the band. So there's another cemetery further down the road that had more vandalism and grave robbing going on. So somebody is doing that over there. He popped up on the feed, and I watched it, and I'm listening to this voice. It's a guy driving a car. You can't see his face. And I'm like, I know this guy. I know, who is this? And I kept going through his videos till I finally saw one with his face, and here it was, the guitar player from the band. He was an a-hole, that guy. He was an a-hole. I took him to Avery Malmsteen, And we got in there, and there was double high walls of Marshall stacks, and he was wailing Marshall, and he was worshiping the stacks up in the front and running around because he was so happy. He'd never been out of his hometown, It was like the first time I took him anywhere. But yeah, that whole Satan worship crew, those guys, they were, all of them were pretty much assholes. They were all self-centered people who couldn't really meet a girl. They couldn't, you know what I mean? These were guys that were, when the one girl who was the hot girl or whatever, when her boyfriend and her would get into a fight, that girl would come the one and hang around with one of these guys in the band. Like, they kind of had girlfriends for that one time a month when they would get into the fight with their boyfriend. The boyfriend didn't want them around, and they never scored. That was what I noticed, was they never had any like serious relationship. And then when they got older and they had money and they had a car and all that, they would get a girl who would end up cheating on them. Like, there was always infidelity, like a curse of infidelity. And going over there to visit them, I would be up there, and the woman would come up, "You gotta take out the garbage." And they would get into a huge fight. Every time it came around, it was like that, like unbelievable fighting, like this harpy woman, like just like unbelievable, like you never saw anything like it. And this is like multiple woman after woman, the type of girl that this guy goes after. So I can't have anything to do with the guy anymore. He every time I ever did anything with him, he got so wasted and insisted on getting wasted before it. Hours late to any concert, drunk, falling down, passing out all the time. As far as I know, I would recommend, unless you're really in a Church of Satan where they've got all the naked people and they're going to be, lighting up the special incense or whatever. I think if it's like a hometown kind of like a little group of Satanist guys that don't really know what they're doing, I really wouldn't recommend it, because none of those guys got any power. And when I found out about that stuff that guy sprinkled around my house, that really infuriated me. And I immediately let my mom know that had happened. And she wasn't surprised. She wasn't surprised at all. My mom's a wise woman. And that was why I'm sure she helped that guy when he was reaching out to her from prison. She probably even mailed him some books to read, which in my opinion, she shouldn't have even done that. Good riddance to all those fucking people. Fuck evil. Evil is never good. This is what I used to say to them. Why you would, if you're gonna worship demons or spirits, that kind of means that there is a God. Why you would choose hell, it's beyond me. Now, as later has been explained to me, is, well, you're not worshiping the devil. They don't believe in a devil. Well, then why do they call it Satan worship? Why is it the Church of Lucifer and all that? Just to fuck with the normies? So, my advice is, if you find something like that in your kid's under his bed, hidden, you got a problem. That's, people go that way. I mean, these guys did it. I think they did it because, the one guy that I'm friends with, he really stressed to me that he doesn't believe in a God. But, well, then why were you reading to that book if you don't believe that? Doesn't make any sense to me. You believe in these spells. So, it's a contradiction to me. I'm not going to have any comments enabled on this video because I don't want to deal with the fallout of it. But this was one of those stories I've been waiting a long time to tell. And thank you for joining me for story time. I hope you enjoyed it, and peace.